So, welcome to our discussion of Miriam and her song. The question of what was the role of Miriam's song? I mean, the people already said, Shiru Hashem Gigoga, sing to God because he's so great. What was added by her saying the same thing? And we say that she was some kind of a leader. I mean, what kind of leader was she? I mean, Moshe was a leader, Aaron was a leader. What did she lead exactly? What does it mean that Miriam was a leader? So let's take a look at our presentation. Miriam and her song. All right. So the key verses from our parsha are just two verses. Vatikach Miriam Anvia, Achot Aaron, and Miriam, the sister of Aaron. Rashi kind of deals with this question: why Aaron took the timbrel, the drum in her hand. But all the women followed after her. The tupim, also with some kind of a percussion, instrument.
It's like a tambourine, or right. There are a lot of different a lot of different kind of hand drums.
And mecholot are dances. Here it says timbrels, but mecholot can mean that they came out with dances. Machol is a dance. And Miriam responded to them. To whom? To the women? The women came out and said, no, to them, lahem is in masculine. To the men. Did they sing in tandem? Is that proper? There's actually a book written from Salonika where he describes that you're not really supposed to do that. If, let's say, the men will sing this one and then the women chime in for that, and the men, that's too much fun. You can't do that. So what's going on here? You go, oh gosh, what she's saying, Shiru Hashem, sing to God because he's great, particularly exalted. He took the rider and the horse, and they all went down. He threw it down into the sea. He hurled it into the sea. So this is what we've got. This is one of the main verses about her role at the splitting of the sea in this week's parsha. And from that, we have to extrapolate a whole thing about Miriam. Of course, many other stories, how she helped. She was watching her brother to see what would happen. She was the one who made sure that made the liaison, the shidduch between Moses' mother and his stepmother, Batya. And then we have this story about how she spoke against Moses and she got leprosy. So not a whole lot of stories. We have to try to figure out what this all means. Let's put it all together. So Rashi says the prophetess took the timbrels. Oh, where had she? What do you mean the prophetess? Where did she prophesy? What makes her a prophetess? Prophetess has to say something. I don't know anything she said. You look in the Torah; it doesn't say anything she said. When she was the sister of Aaron alone, before Moses was born, she said a prophecy. Why does it say sister of Aaron? Because her prophecy comes in the days when Moses alone, when Aaron was in charge, and Moses was, who knows where he was. Before Moses was even born. She said, my mother will sometime bear a son and will deliver Israel, as it's stated in Treatise Zohar. So let's look at the Gemara in Sota, which Rashi just alludes to. It's as if like everybody knows the Gemara in Sota and Megillah. Let's see, what's the prophecy that he's alluding to? So let's turn to Megillah. Later we'll see Sota later. Gemara Megillah says, she's the sister of Aaron, the sister of Moses. Why does the verse mention only one of her brothers, not Moses? Nachman said, the Rav said, for she prophesied when she was the sister of Aaron, in other words, when she was younger. She prophesied in her youth, before Moses was born. Some say she was 7. I saw something that she died at 127, so maybe she was 7 years older. I heard someone say she was 3, but 7 sounds better. And she would say, my mother is destined to bear a son who will deliver the Jewish people to salvation. At the time when Moses was born, the entire house was filled with light. And her father stood and kissed her on her head and said, my daughter, your prophecy has been fulfilled. This is an amazing son. He fills the room with light. He's a light. He's amazing. But once Moses was cast in the river, her father arose and rapped her on the head. He smacked, as they say around here in the South, he smacked her upside the head. Excuse the expression. Of course, it's not politically correct. Surely he didn't really do it. And he said, my daughter, where's your prophecy? Now, as it looked as though the young Moses would soon meet his death. This is the meaning what it says in regard to Miriam's watching Moses in the river, and his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done of him. Why was she standing at a distance? Why did she want to know what was going to be done of him? To know what would be the end of her prophecy. What would be the result of her prophecy? She had prophesied that her brother was destined to be the savior of the Jewish people. Would he become the savior of the Jewish people, or would he drown? She came there to see what would happen. And in fact, he becomes a prince. He goes, and the princess saves him. So what was her prophecy? It's a very unusual thing. We say the prophetess, she must have prophesied that the Jews should keep the Torah. No, she prophesied that Moses would be born. And there's another midrash that Moses, that it says that a man went from Levi and he married the daughter of Levi, and then they had Moses. So you say, what do you mean he got married and they had Moses? They had 2 other kids before that. His sister is watching him in the bull rushes. How could the parents just get married now when the baby's born? And the answer is the parents got divorced. Why? Because they said, I want to give, if we're married, we're going to have children. We have children, they're going to throw them in the sea. So Miriam said, you're worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh wanted to kill the boys, and you're not having any children, because that means there won't be any boys or girls. I object. I'm a girl. Why don't you have a girl? So that's when they got back together. They remarried, and the father thanked her for getting them back together. But then said, you were wrong. The baby's not going to save Israel. He's going to be thrown in the sea. Okay. Then we have another problem. So that's the question. Why does it say she was a sister of Aaron? What does it mean she's a prophetess? Now we have another question. And that is the timbrels. She took the timbrels. Oh, sure, yeah. You're walking through the sea, you go into your knapsack, you take out your timbrel. Wait a second. You don't know who has timbrels. They barely had time to take the bread. Why would they have timbrels? So the answer is the righteous women in that generation were confident that God would perform miracles for them, and they accordingly had brought timbrels with them from Egypt. So certain were they that they would have a redemption that Miriam and other women had timbrels in their knapsack, and they were ready to dance at the drop of a hat because they were prepared. They were prepared for good stuff in the future. Now we have to ask an interesting question. Is this a feminine trait? No, in general, I don't like that so much. Men are from Mars and women's from Venus. To say that all the women do this and all the women do that. But I think we can say, in a general sense, that some things women might be better at, and men might be better at. So is there something here of a feminine trait of anticipation? Might there be something that women can wait in anticipation, and men are like, that's it, we're done, game's over, we're going home? Can you think of anything that might make women more ready to sort of suffer in the short term for the long term?
Waiting 9 months to have a child.
Yeah. Or going through the pain of childbirth and then saying, okay, let's do this again. We'll have pain of childbirth again, right? Someone said, what's the difference between a torture chamber and giving birth to a child? There's no difference. The difference is that you know what's coming later. In the torture chamber, you know you're going to be dead. In the when you're giving birth to a baby, you know there's going to be a life. So, it's all a matter of perspective. So, is there a feminine trait here? Is there a special trait that these women had? They were anticipating. So we're slaves? That's not the end. That's the childbirth. The pangs of deliverance. Eventually, we will be delivered, we'll be redeemed, and we will be able to sing. So they were anticipating. They were waiting to sing. And the question is, who needs another song? We already have a song. So Miriam says she sung unto them. What do you mean she replied to them? Moses sang the song to the men. He sang it, and they repeated after him. Miriam sang the song to the women, and they repeated after her. So the Mechilta, the Midrash, the classic official Midrash of the New York Yankees, of Shemot, says that don't think that it was the way we said was not proper in terms of Kol Isha, in terms of women's singing, to have men sing and then the women respond to the men, not proper. Rather, men sang when there was a refrain for the men, and the women sang there was a refrain for the women. So, but that seems to imply that there was more. She can't keep saying the refrain. Right? You can't keep saying that. Even in the Prince of Egypt, which truncated the song of the splitting of the sea, she had to sing more than just a few words. The Maccabeat song, they add other words. So maybe there was more than just one line. It alludes to the entire song. Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor was a rabbi in France after Rashi. I often quote him. He has so much good stuff to say. The Chizkuni often quotes. He doesn't just quote him. He subsumes a lot of his comments inside the Chizkuni's statement. So the truth is, they said the whole song. It's the same song that Moses sang. But we already wrote the songs. We're not going to write it again. So we just wrote one line as if to say, of course, she said the whole song. So it's interesting. It still begs the question, who needs another song? So the men sang the song and the women diddly do, diddly dum. So they sang the song and they sang the song. You think, right? Anything you can do, I can do better. You sang your song, I do my song.
Did they sing the whole Oz Yashir? That's a long song.
Right. They were patient. Yeah, they sang the ganze song.
Oh.
So the question is, what's going on? What are they adding? So the Emek Davar, the Netziv, 19th century, he says, Anoshim Asulam Shir Aruch. They made a very long song. Yeah, we're not going to write the song that they wrote. I mean, it wasn't as special. It wasn't. Maybe it was for here. He's a jolly good fellow. She's a jolly good fellow. I mean, it wasn't anything worthy of a Sefer Torah. So we're not going to write what their song was. It wasn't written in the Holy Spirit. Soger. We call bodies the refrain of every paragraph and stanza. I'll be Miriam. That was through Miriam, through the Holy Spirit. Same thing. The women were saying, David killed Saul killed thousands, and David killed tens of thousands. Is that the whole song? That was what they were singing? No. They had all kinds of stanzas. David killed the Philistines, right? They did all kinds of songs. And in each stanza, the refrain was Saul killed thousands, David killed tens of thousands. And that's what got Saul upset. But the Torah didn't record the rest of the song. It wasn't worthy of recording. So the Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor thinks they sang the whole thing. Rashi thinks that, I'm not sure, maybe saying that Miriam sang that one line and they repeated it, or Miriam also sang the whole song. However, the Emek Davar says, no, they had a different song. That song is not recorded. All right, so then the men's song is better, their song is not as good. What are the women adding? What's Miriam adding? Who even cares if the women were saying? What's going on? So the Nachal Kedumim, commentary of the Chidah was very prolific. He was a rabbi a lot of places. We're going to learn next week about Tuesday nights. We're going to talk about the rabbis of Tzfat. So he passed through that area. He was in Egypt. He was in Europe. He was everywhere. He was in Turkey. He was in Greece. He was everywhere. Was that new era of like a lot of travel around, after 1492. Anyway, so he says, don't worry about the problem of men and women singing together. The women heard, maybe the men could hear Miriam sing. You think that's separate marching through the splitting of the sea. The men and women may have been together, so people could hear the women dancing. So he said, don't worry, there's no hero. When you fear the divine presence, like the people there pointed to God, they said, there he is, there's God. When you're in that kind of situation, you don't have to worry about people having bad thoughts, about listening to women singing. In such a circumstance, men and women can sing together. You don't have to worry about it. So, when you can see the beauty of God, as it says in the Song of Songs, then it's very pleasant. It's no problem. So he goes on and he said, I don't understand. How could the women sing in front of all of the Jews? Isn't Kol B'Isha Erva, a woman singing is forbidden according to the Talmud? Or at least you shouldn't sing it, you shouldn't hear it, certainly during holy songs, during the Shema. What did she take? She took the gematria Taf, Tachas Yada B'Koach Takef Gedulas Neviyusa, she took her prophecy, and with the Shekhinah, with this power, she was able to undo any problem of Hara, any problem of men thinking the wrong thoughts. And she responded, there was no problem here at all. So there wasn't any problem. That's why it said the masculine should have been feminine. Batan lahem, it should have said lahen, to them, the women. But no, it says to them, the men. Why? Because over here the women were like men. It didn't make a difference if you were a man or woman. There would be no bad thoughts by anybody. Okay, interesting. And then we say, why so violent? I mean, this is the women's song. The women are singing that the rider of the horse and the horse, they all went thrown down into the ocean. It's kind of a violent song. Is there anything feminine about it? Seems like Yael, who chopped off the Judith, who chopped off the leader's heads. So it's interesting. So violent. It's interesting. These are slaves right? What will a slave do when he sees that he or she sees that their freedom is being taken away? It could be very violent. It's interesting. But we have to ask, what was different about the men versus the women? Let's get to the bottom of it. So it says the men, Moses and the children of Israel, they sang this song. And they said, let's sing a song. Same song that Miriam sang. With Miriam, it says, Miriam took the timbrel or the drum of some sort, and all the women came out with timbrels and maybe with dancing. Oh, so that's the difference. The difference is, where's the music? You see, Charlie, they've tried to put you out of business, right?
Yes.
No, Charlie makes a difference if we have Purim and there's no trumpet, or at least a piano or something.
They had all these Egyptian hand drums with them. Right.
Probably the finest. Probably. Don't forget, when we say that they borrowed vessels from the Egyptians, it doesn't just mean like garments or gold pots. It could be a gold violin or something. Whatever instruments they had in those days. Yeah. So a golden drum. So it could have been something they borrowed from the Egyptians. But in any event, makes it when Charlie plays, people listen. When Charlie plays, it makes a difference. When you have musical instruments, it makes it. Also, dance. In other words, sometimes say, "Oh, it's very exciting in the shul. Everyone's clapping and they're saying." No, if you dance, then it takes you to a new level. Dancing, the Hasidim say, is like you're dancing and you as your legs go up, you're going floating in the air. It's like you're flying. It's a whole different experience. So the women, what did the women add? They added a whole experiential element, a whole more textured music. Give me the words, Charlie. What do they add when you change the acapella to instrumental? What happens?
It just enhances it.
Right.
When you take acapella singing and you add instruments, it just enhances it and gives it rhythm and makes you want to get up and dance.
The whole feeling. It was an experience.
The Hasidic thing, the music affects you so much you just can't sit still. You've got to move.
Right.
That's what that's
very good. So that's what we say is that a man makes a kiddush. A man could probably, if you put me in charge of Shabbos, I'll buy a bottle of herring, and I'll get the roasted chicken from the Kroger's, and I'll put a box of rice up, and we'll have a couple of sliced tomatoes. We'll have a meal. But you ask Blumen to make a meal; it's a whole experience. For when a woman makes Shabbos, it's like the candles. There's an atmospherics to it. So Miriam added the atmospherics, something very unique that was added here with the women, some kind of an experience. It wasn't just a song. It was a whole experience of dancing. It was an emotional thing. It's a whole different thing. So that's, now we're beginning to get to the question of what's the leadership of Miriam. We can begin to understand. So what kind of leader was she? Well, lest you think that maybe she wasn't a leader. She was Moses' brother, Moses' sister, and she did some nice things before he was born. And, no, it says in Micah that that's wrong. I took you out of Egypt, saved you from the house of bondage. I sent before you Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. It's very clear. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. That these were it says them in one breath. We all know Moshe is not just the teacher; he's the leader. We all know that Aaron is one of the leaders. I mean, to split the sea. I mean, to bring the plagues, to teach the Torah. He's part of the whole thing. So what's Miriam? She sang a song. One sang a song. I had a cousin who used to make fun of people. He would say, "That guy, all he ever did when we were in yeshiva, he once sang a song on Shabbos. He taught everyone a song. That's all he ever did in his whole life." So is that Miriam? Miriam is this
No,
gal who she once sang a song once.
no, she's
So,
a leader.
oh,
She got everybody up and going, and
right. So the same person who has the ability to get everybody up and going, that is the leader. We once had someone who came to the Federation in St. Louis, and he was a good chazan from Riverdale, and Ellie Kranzler. And before the end of the dinner, the whole Federation crowd, all these stodgy people who probably, they came to the dinner, they sat with their suit and their fancy dresses, and they eat the meal, and they clap, and they go home, and they write the check. That was the usual experience. This guy gets up there, he starts playing guitar, and like Charlie said, you couldn't help it. You had to dance. So all of a sudden, these people are dancing around the room in a big circle, as if it was some kind of a Hasidic Farbrengen or something.
he must have been good.
Yeah. So what is that? It's leadership, it's charisma. So Miriam had something there. This was not just a one-time thing. If you got it, you've got it, right? It's not you sang this mirror once. So Rashi says that that means that Rabbi Yonathan ben Uziel, the Targum we associate with the great sage Yonathan ben Uziel. Yonathan ben Uziel clearly had a commentary on a translation of the Torah, but the one we have today may not be exactly what he had, but anyway, it's an old translation, and it's in Aramaic, and it says before Rashi, "Shlichas kadamach, I sent before you." This is a translation of Micah. Nevi'ah, Tlata Nevi'ah. Sent Moses and Aaron. Miriam. Three what? Leaders what? No, they're three prophets. So that's interesting. Saying that Moshe and Aaron and Miriam are prophets, and obviously we know from Balos that they're not on the same level. Moshe's prophecy is unique. It's one of the 13 principles of faith, but they are three prophets. But he gives more detail. Moshe alpha Masiras Dinim. Moshe teaches the transmission of the laws. Aaron l'chapar. Aaron's job is to atone. Very simple. You atone. That's it. Al Amma, on the people, to atone for the people. Well, Miriam, what's Miriam's role? Oh, Royal and Shia, to teach the women. Very much as opposed to the pre-19th century notion, pre-20th century notion that women didn't learn anything. Women didn't go to school. They learned from their mothers, and that's it. Very informal education, which with modernization and everything, it turned out women didn't know anything. Or even the Middle Ages, the Tosfot write that women couldn't read the benching. Very much as opposed to that, he said, no. Miriam's job 3,000 years ago was to teach the women Torah. So, there was Torah learning. Again, was it slightly different than the men's learning? Okay, whatever it was, but it was learning. They were teaching them, and the women taught the women. So, what kind of leader was she? According to this, she was a leader for the women, which is exactly what it says in our parsha. Women. She took the timbrel and she led the women. Ezra says, I'm sorry, it's a mistake. Okay. Now, the leadership may have been like a spiritual leadership. What do you mean? So let's take a look. The Rabbi quotes in the Medrash Lamdenu. I didn't have the Lamdenu. So we'll hear from a secondary source. The Medrash says, it's called the Lamdenu, that we read the verse in Micah that God sent Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Holy One, blessed be He, said, Bo-Rei, come and see. Ma beini lebein melech basav adam. What's the difference between me and a flesh king, flesh and blood king? A flesh and blood king, usually, if a king sends messengers to a country or to a state or to a community, what do they have to do? It's one of the rules. You got to pay for the soldiers, right? When the Polish soldiers come by, you got to give lunch to the Polish soldiers. It's a rule. I didn't do that. What's the word? There's an English word for that. I forget what it's called. I sent you 3 representatives 3 redeemers. So here you use another expression. Miriam was one of the redeemers. The rabbis say with the merit of the women, the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. These are 3 redeemers. You don't have to provide for them because Israeli leaders, they don't lead from the back, they lead from the front. They provide your living. You don't have to pay them to lead you, like the rabbi. They will pay you. Haman because Moshe was there, he provided from God that they all had man every day. Anania covers chuzaron, protection, insurance. They got the insurance policy for Aaron. Because of him and his merit, God gave us clouds of glory, protected us. And Be'er was Miriam. They needed water. MLGW, she paid the bill because of her merit, because of her greatness. God gave a well to the Jews wherever they went. So they didn't need water. So instead of having to pay the leaders paid us. They gave us food, water, shelter, everything we can need. These 3 people include all the things that God did for us in the desert. It says he gave us Moses, it means he gave us the man. He gave us Aaron, and he gave us the cloud of glory. And he gave us Miriam, it means he gave us the well. So that's the Barbanel's interpretation. But the Medrash is saying that the leadership is spiritual. What does that mean? I'll tell you a weird thing about myself. I sometimes feel like the first year I got here, there were no funerals. And I said, thank God. I'm just learning the congregation. I have to give all these sermons, different classes, learning the people. And I get out in the community. I don't have time for people's funerals. Sure enough, wasn't one funeral. No, I'm not some sort of a mystic. I'm not some sort of a great pious individual. I can't, but maybe, who knows, maybe the rabbi can have an effect who lives, who dies. Maybe there's a spiritual leadership when you have that leader. But not Greenblatt once said, there's been so many deaths recently. Something's not right in this community. Something must be going on. Maybe there's something we have to look into. What needs to be done? So then that's in our level. We live in a world where God is hidden. But in their world, where God was revealed very much, as long as you had Moses and Aaron and Miriam, they provided some sort of a spiritual merit which supported the whole community. Think of Reb Tzadok. There was a fellow in the Talmudic times. He was fasting all the time. He would just sit and fast and fast and fast. As long as he was fasting, the temple wouldn't be destroyed. And suddenly it was destroyed. You couldn't control it anymore. But it was in his merit. There's a spiritual leadership. Say because that person is the leader, everybody's okay. Or to the extent that they're not okay, he's not doing his job. She's not doing her job. So what kind of leader was Miriam? Maybe she was the type of leader that she didn't have to do anything. But she was so holy that because she was there, the Jews were okay. Everything was good. It's a totally different kind of leadership. It's a spiritual leadership. Very mystical kind of an idea. The Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, Bam Vasrim, Yushloshan Nevi'im. So the Radak, in his terse words, he says, these are people who mivaser, they're the bearers of good tidings that the Jews will be redeemed. So we call them redeemers. We call them people who bring the tidings of redemption. 3 prophets, they foretold the exodus from Egypt. Aaron was telling them in Egypt before Moses became the prophet, before he came back to Egypt. Moses told them God's gonna redeem you, Pakod Pakati. And Miriam was also telling the women, don't worry about it. We're gonna be redeemed. Don't worry, parents, have children. They'll be thrown in the river. I'll save them. We're gonna have a redemption. We're gonna have a redeemer. Mivasvim. That's her role, was to tell the prophet the future and to bring the redemption. The Zohar speaks about some sort of Panthenon. Is that the word? Pantheon or Panthenon? Anyway, Parthenon. Parthenon and Pantheon. What's the word? Anybody? Dr. Brooks, you got to help me out here.
There were 2 different places. That's the best I can do. The
Right.
Parthenon was in Greece.
Right.
Athens, I think.
Right.
Pantheon,
Anyway. Well, in any event, so
yeah, Panthenon is a group something.
Is a
it's
what?
a group, right? The Pantheon. Right. Pantheos, maybe. Anyway, so the Zohar says the following. Zohar, the mystical book. There were three brothers, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, as it says in the verse in Micah that we quoted. Miriam is Malchus. Miriam represents the spiritual value of kingship, because we'll show later that one of her great descendants is David. Moses is the son. That's the he is the Chabad, the three higher levels of God's emanation. Aaron is the Zroh Yamin. Aaron, when you ever see those Kabbalistic things of like a person with different sides, Aaron is the right side of kindness. Hur is the left. He was holding Moses' hand from the left. That's Miriam's son. And some people say Nachshon. And first Miriam died. It's like the moon went away. And the well went away. Then, so anyway, the point is that they represent the different expressions of God. These leaders represent the different expressions of God in the world. You know, sometimes you have a Rebbe, and the Rebbe is so kind, he represents kindness in the world. And the Rebbe is so brilliant, it represents chokhmah, wisdom. Sometimes you have a Rebbe that's so harsh, and tells you, you got to keep the laws, you guys are not doing a good job. It's like a judge. And you learn the justice of God. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam was God sent to us three expressions of himself. Now, of course, this is why the Zohar is so dangerous. I mean, this might as well be Christianity, okay? This is like one step away from Christianity. It's, right, that there are different expressions of God. They're not God. Let's be very clear. Moses, Aaron, Miriam, they're not God. They're not even expressions of God. But in our lack of vocabulary, all we can say is that Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, they reflected three different things about God. So that's what we mean when we say that there were three leaders. Don't ask the question, well, what role did she play? Did she arrange the budget or not? Was she involved in the planning of the next location where they were going to camp out and giving out of the wood to the people or not? Well, if she wasn't, then she's not a leader. No, that's not how it works. We talked about spiritual leadership, the idea of, did they survive? And whose merit was it that they survived? And we talk about the Panthenon, meaning who lehavdil. We're not talking paganism here. What aspects of God's greatness did they reflect? Everyone reflects greatness. It doesn't take, you don't have to be who knows who to reflect God's greatness, right? Right. Charlie reflects the beautiful music that can be made, right? Dr. Rabbi reflects the healing power of God. And Ian is working on the same thing. Michelle also worked in the healthcare field. Reflects that kind of an idea, right? Right. So, right. Jacob's a military man. He represents the man of God of war, like the
man of war. I'm a true warrior. Don't worry.
Oh yeah. Watch out
in the paperwork
I wouldn't
brigade.
want Jacob in a dark alley.
Yeah, no, I'm in the paperwork brigade.
So,
expert marksman.
But it's the intelligence brigade. But in any event,
yeah.
So everyone represents some value. Now, so there's an idea here that she's Malchus. What do you mean she's kingship? What do you mean Malchus? Why is Miriam Malchus? Miriam's not the leader. She's not the king. So now we turn to the Gemara in Sota. Probably don't have enough time, but let's see if we can redo this. Gemara in Sota. Let's see. It's a long Gemara. The Gemara in Sota is part of a tradition which the Daf Yomi alluded to recently in Psachim, that there used to be a tradition of how to learn Divrei Yam. What's Divrei Yam? Chronicles. If you want to go to sleep at night, open the beginning of the book of Chronicles, and you'll read the names of all the people who lived between Adam and David. It's a very long laundry list. It's a nice phone book. It'll help you fall asleep. But the rabbis, one time, who was it, who said to Rabbi Yochanan, teach me, Rav Kahana, said to Rabbi Yochanan, teach me, Rav Simloi said to Rabbi Yochanan, teach me the real midrash and the real way of learning Divrei Yamim, the Chronicles. So Rabbi Yochanan said to him, well, you're not good enough for that. So finally he convinced him that he was a smart guy. He was a Talmudic scholar. So he taught him the midrashim on the Chronicles, which we don't have anymore.
Wow.
Except for what I'm about to show you. So the student said, well, all right, we'll learn it for about 3 months. He said, what, 3 months? And he threw a piece of dirt at him. And he said, 3 months? Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, it took her 3 years to learn some stuff that she was learning. Why do you think you can learn this in 3 months? It takes much longer than 3 months to learn these things. So let's take a look. This, I believe, is part of the secret midrash of the Book of Chronicles. The one who says that it's referring to houses of priesthood, that what it says in the beginning of Exodus that the women were blessed, the midwives, with 2 houses. What houses? If it's the house of priesthood, and the Levites referring to Aaron and Moses, who were the sons of Yocheved. And the one who says that the houses of royalty, they were given houses of royalty, it's referring to David. David came from Miriam? Yes, as it says. Now we go to the Chronicles. And Azuva, the wife of Kalev, don't fall asleep yet. The wife of Kalev died, and Kalev took him Ephrath, who was a woman, and bore him Hur. That's why the rabbis say that Caleb's son was Hur, Miriam. Hur was the son of Miriam. Chronicles. As will be explained further, Ephrath is Miriam. When it says Caleb married Ephrath, it means Miriam. And it's written, David was the son of an Ephrathite in Bethlehem of Judah. So we see that he was descended from Ephrath, meaning he was from Miriam. Not Ephrath, not the place Ephrath where my cousin Josh lives. No, the place near Bethlehem. No, Ephrath means is another name for Miriam. And what does the Gemara say? The Gemara discusses the family of Kalev. In Chronicles, it says, and Caleb, son of Chesron, begot children of Azubah, his wife, and of Yerioth, and these were her sons, Yesher and Shovav and Ardon. Look at Chronicles. The Gemara asks, was Caleb actually the son of Chesron? Wasn't he the son of Yefuneh? Everybody knows Kalev ben Yefuneh. How could Caleb be the son of Chesron, who was much earlier? As the verse in Numbers says. So the Gemara answers, he was the son of Chesron, but he was called the son of Yefuneh as an appellation, indicating he was a son who turned away Shepana from the council of the spies. He turned away from the evil spies. The Gemara goes on. But it's still difficult. Chesron could not be his father, as Caleb was the son of Kenaz, as is written in Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. If Kenaz was Caleb's younger brother, if Othniel was Caleb's younger brother, and he was the son of Kenaz, so that means that Caleb was the son of Kenaz. So Rava says Caleb was a stepson of Kenaz. He and Othniel were only half brothers. The Gemara comments, the language of another is also precise. Than Caleb, what can he say? So the Gemara goes on, and they talk about the Gemara goes on. He begot children of Azuvah. His wife is Azuvah and Yeriot. What? He had 3 wives. He had Ephrath and Azuvah and Yeriot. And these are his sons, Jesher and Chova. The Gemara says, the verse is the verse is referring to the wife of Kalev by the name Azuvah. So he says, that's really Miriam. Why does he call Azuvah? Because everyone initially abandoned her. Azuvah means to leave you. Did not want to marry her because she was sickly and unattractive. The verse states, and Caleb, the son of Chesron, begot children of Azuvah. The Gemara asks, why the term holid, begot, but doesn't this verse say that he married her? Why use the term holid? He just means he married her. So Rabbi Yochanan says, it teaches us that with regard to anyone who marries a woman for the sake of heaven, because of her righteousness and not because of her appearance, the verse ascribes him credit as if he gave birth to her. So the Gemara is saying somehow that Miriam was very homely, sickly looking. The same verse refers to Miriam as Yerioth. The Gemara explains her face was like a pallid curtain, like a drab gray curtain. Yerioth. The verse continues, and these were sons, Vana. Do not read Vana, but rather Boneh. They were builders. Their names, Yesher means he was righteous, and Shovav means that he was broke. He broke his evil inclination, and Ardon means that he ruled. Some because his face of some say because the face of his wife Miriam became like a rose of Vered. After they were married, she was called Vardon, due to a rose-like complexion. So, and then they say there were 2 wives. So anyway, the Miriam became like 2 wives because she changed over time. Originally she was sickly, but ultimately she became like a young woman, and etc. etc. And then eventually she became so beautiful that she was like a tzara. She was a rival to other women. She was called Zohar or Zohar because her face shone like the moon, right? So, and she became like a gift, to his wife to entice her. Anyway, it's very interesting. So, what in the world is Gemara talking about? That she was homely and sickly and ugly and plain looking, and then she became so beautiful. So, and she was married to this Caleb, who became a Judean leader, and eventually they beget children. Eventually, David comes from this line. So, what in the world is the Gemara saying? So, maybe what the Gemara is saying is that you think that Miriam is just like nothing, and the role of women in Judaism, it's so bad. Look at that. Miriam, she's just like a third wheel. She's nothing important. Comes the Gemara and says, oh no, she eventually is the mother of kings. This woman with her leadership talents, leading the women with enthusiasm and with zeal and with spirit. That was David, who eventually inspired all of Israel. Her leadership qualities were internal. It wasn't good looks like David, who had good looks. She had a charisma about her, and people appreciated her. She's not one of the great beauties of the world. Most Jewish biblical women are beauties. Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, right? They're beautiful women. Right? They had all of Alamilas. They had all good things. They're very spiritual, and they're also very beautiful. Not Miriam. She's never mentioned in that light. The rabbis go to town with that and say she was completely ugly. But what does it mean? She had this gift of a charisma. JFK, laughed. Why did Miriam speak lashon hara? So we have to tie this into a video we once did about Miriam and lashon hara. So I have this theory. It goes like this. You have a story that Miriam spoke lashon hara against her brother. God got very mad, punished her with leprosy, and then Moses had to pray for her. Aaron prayed for her, and she was healed. And the Jews, out of great respect, they waited for her till she was healed. They wouldn't move, showing that she waited for her brother. The Jews waited for her. She was a very serious leader. You don't go anywhere without Miriam. Good. What? Really? This is the image of Miriam, that she spoke lashon hara? What's going on here? This is beneath her, right? These are our heroes. This woman who spoke lashon hara, that's one of the only stories we have about Miriam. What's going on? So, I suggest many years ago that she was playing her role as a prophetess. If you wonder, how is she a prophet? What did she ever say? That's exactly it. She saw Moses was not a family man. He was not a good example of what it means to be a husband. He had nothing to do with his wife. She said, Moses, you've got to be a man. You got to be a good husband. You have to stay with your wife. Your wife is complaining. You're never there. And God says, you're wrong. You're not wrong to yell at him. Your job is to yell at him. You are the prophet. The prophet's job is to yell at the king, to tell the king that he's doing wrong. Just happens to be that you got it wrong in this case. Moses is unusual. You're right. Joel Finkelstein should be nice to his wife, should spend time. But Moses is different from all the prophets, and he should not spend time with his wife. You're Miriam, you should spend time with your husband. Aaron, fine. But Moses is different. The Pentateuch is different from other books of prophecy. Any Joe Schmo who's a prophet is different from Moses. Moses gives us the direct word from God that we follow so seriously. We observe our Jewish life based on Moses. So what was Miriam doing? She was playing her role as prophet to criticize the leader for things she viewed as wrong. It happened to be she was wrong about what she was thinking. She wasn't telling lashon hara. She was trying to tell Aaron that we need to talk to our brother about this marriage. It's not right. Turns out she was wrong about the topic, but she was right in her role. What was her role? To rebuke Moses. So I like to say like this. The role of Nathan was to rebuke David. He had a lot of work to do. The role of Elijah was to rebuke Ahab. He had a lot of work to do. The role of Miriam was to rebuke Moses. She didn't have any work to do. She was like the old Maytag repairman. She had no work at all. A little plug for Maytechnique. She tried once to rebuke him for something, and then she happened to have been wrong about it. So, all right, so slap on the wrist. Okay. But it wasn't that she was just talking lashon hara. She had nothing to do one day in the desert for 40 years, not a lot to do. So she was smoozing with her brother about how bad her brother is. No, that's not Miriam. Miriam was trying to rebuke the king. So what kind of leader was she? Leadership means that she was trying to rebuke the king, which is a very appropriate thing to do. So finally, we ask, what is leadership? And I think as men, as people, I don't know, we're just going through an election. We have a very specific kind of a notion of what leadership is, and it's not a very broad definition. Leadership is not just telling the troops which way to go, right or left, setting the foreign policy, figuring out what to do with the Edomites or the Moabites, or what happens when people complain or whatever, dealing with the complaints. That's not the only thing. Leadership is the charisma. Leadership is being so righteous that things happen because you're there. Because you're there, certain things happen. Nobody knows, but the rabbis, God knows that they only had water in the desert because Miriam was there. It's that kind of charisma. It's sometimes it's the long haul. It's the woman who has set the tone that we need to wait, like birthing a child. Wait 9 months. We need to go through the pain. We'll get to the gain later. It's about a woman who could see that it was worth bringing children into this world. It was about a woman who exemplified a certain type of leadership, which when she died, she didn't think she was a king of any sort. It turned out that model of her charismatic leadership eventually translated into David himself. So we don't know what role we play in good things that we do, the ripple effects that it has. So who is Miriam? She's a leader, but not necessarily a leader in the kind of sense that you and I might imagine. There is another possibility here I also wanted to mention, possibility of women's leadership. Sometimes we, the modern Orthodox community, we sometimes say, well, we want women to be real leaders, not just leaders for women. But there might be something to this idea of men who lead men and women who lead women. Could it be that, in the end of days, you would have a congregation which, everybody, the rabbi, perhaps scholar or whatever. But generally speaking, when women had some sort of question or want inspiration or classes or lectures, they would go to the women leader and she would lead them. Is there something like that? Is something like that emerging in the Haredi community, in Orthodox communities, where women are leading the women? You have a woman say, Rebbitzin so-and-so speaking the Shabbos. 500 people come to hear the Rebbitzin. Is that not leadership? Right? They tell stories about a certain Rebbitzin, a certain Jewish woman leader, and she inspires everyone. Is that not leadership? So there's a lot of different models of leadership other than the frontal guy in charge kind of leadership. And maybe that's what Miriam is all about. So that concludes our formal discussion.